The history of the Dwarf realms, or the Thanquol, is one of lost grandeur and fallen greatness. Once, it was the preeminent empire of the world, and its grand holds proudly dotted the entire length of the World's Edge Mountains. No beast or greenskin could contest the Dwarfs, and when the treacherous Elgi of Ulthuan betrayed their friendship, the Dawi drove them back with hammer and axe. Alas, those days are long gone. Most of their holds are fallen, overrun by dragons, greenskins, and Skaven during the Time of Woes. Every dwarf has ancestral grudges from this time, wrongs they bitterly nurse within the very core of their being, and hope to one day repay in blood. The Norgrimlings, a clan hailing from the fallen hold of Vala Azrael Ungol, or Karak Eight Peaks, are no exception. These dwarfs were proud miners, and as such, they were badly mauled by the Skaven during the destruction of Karak Eight Peaks. While many Dawi from Clan Norgrimlings died, some clan members managed to escape and find new homes throughout the Thanquol. Clan Norgrimlings has rebounded somewhat since then, and some continue to work as miners for other holds. Many, however, seek to join the honored ranks of the Ironbreakers and Iron Drakes. These warriors of the deep tunnels are crucial to a hold's defense, and they have plenty of opportunity to avenge themselves and their clan against the Thagaraki that call the tunnels home. With King Belegar Ironhammer's recent reclamation of Karak Eight Peaks, miners, Ironbreakers, and Iron Drakes from Clan Norgrimlings have flocked to his banner in hopes of returning home once and for all. Despite the Norgrimlings' skill at producing Ironbreakers, there doesn't actually seem to be a unit in the lore known as Norgrimlings Ironbreakers. If there are, my apologies for the oversight, but a thorough scouring of 3 editions of Dwarf books and both End Times books covering the fate of the Dawi didn't turn anything up. That's not to say I'm coming to you empty-handed, however. Instead, a unit of Ironbreakers known as the Axes of Nor seems to be the inspiration for the Regiment of Renown. If nothing else, they certainly live up to the Norgrimlings' Ironbreakers' in-game reputation for being stalwart defenders. Like all Ironbreakers, the Axes of Nor are superbly trained and equipped. Each member of the unit is an excellent fighter, endowed with the natural doughtiness of their kind, and they can fight for hours without rest. So great is their trust in each other that those in the back ranks would often catch naps while standing, held in place by the soldiers around them. When they must move, the Axes of Nor make up for their lack of speed with precision and efficiency. Their drills allow them to move in unison and execute complex maneuvers on the battlefield. This is a valuable skill when coordinating with the Forge Furies, a regiment of Iron Drakes that often accompanies the Axes of Nor into battle. If skill at arms and discipline aren't enough to fell their foes, then their armaments most certainly are. Every one of the Axes of Nor is clad in Gromroll full plate, and their axes and shields are made of the substance as well. When combined with advantageous terrain and their previously mentioned attributes, they can take on forces many times their size. There are recorded instances of the Axes of Nor killing 400 Skaven slaves in a single battle without suffering a single casualty. Considering the regiment only consists of 25 Dawi, this is no mean feat. It is not without reason that the Axes of Nor are the most renowned regiment of Ironbreakers to hail from Clan Norgrimlings, and their battlecry of Gand Damaz, Az Baraz, Norgrimson Za, or Suffer the Axe Promise, the ancestors of Nor are upon you, is feared by Night Goblin and Skaven alike throughout the Eight Peaks. The Axes of Nor have fought alongside Belegar Ironhammer from the very beginning of the reconquest of Karak Eight Peaks, some 50 years ago. Indeed, they played a pivotal role in its opening stages. Belegar's initial plan relied upon capturing the Citadel, an above-ground fortification in the heart of Karak Eight Peaks. From there, the Dawi would have a fortified base of operations from which they could retake the rest of the hold. Unfortunately, when Belegar's army arrived, the Citadel was infested by a horde of night goblins. If the dwarfs were to survive, then the goblins would have to be dealt with and the Citadel secured. While the king and his elite bodyguard of hammerers, the Iron Brotherhood, made their way towards the Citadel itself, the Axes of Nor held the East Gate against reinforcing greenskins. Only their stalwart defense bought the true king of Karak Eight Peaks enough time to reclaim his ancestral halls and establish a defensive position within. Most of what we know about the Axes of Nor comes from the end times. They were still sworn to King Belegar when the Skaven launched a major offensive in the autumn of 2523 IC. After destroying one of the Eight Peaks, Karak and crippling several others, Clan Moors unleashed a devastating attack against the Dwarf fortress. Belegar swiftly deployed his warriors to choke points, and the Axes of Nor were sent to guard the steel-clad door of Bar Undak. This door joined the Hall of Reckoning, which was still beyond Dabi control, to the rest of the citadel. If the door of Bar Undak fell, the Thagaraki would have unimpeded access to the heart of the hold. The Thane of the Axes of Nor, Borek Norgrimson, wasn't terribly pleased to be guarding the door at all. It was a fine defensive position, but it was one of 40 entryways into the hold. The Thane was of the opinion that some of the doors should have been sealed well in advance of the attack, and the door of Barundak was one of them. Still, he, the Axes of Nor, and the Forge Furies performed their job admirably. With drilled precision, the Axes of Nor would withstand the brunt of the Skaven assault, wait for an opportune moment, and then push forward to clear the rabble. They would then part to let the Forge Furies through so their Drake guns could incinerate the Ratmen as they fled. When the hall was clear, the Axes of Nor set about shoving the corpses into a massive pit at the heart of the Hall of Reckoning to rob the Skaven of any cover their dead brethren might have provided. When the Skaven returned, the Forge Furies would bathe them with flame until they came too close, at which point they retreat behind the Axes of Nor once more. This cycle would repeat for 2 months, less than 40 dwarfs against thousands of Skaven. Assuming accurate casualty estimates in my sources, the dwarfs lost around 13 of their number during that time. If every battle saw around 300 or 400 Skaven fall, as previously recorded, and there was only one battle a day, then the Axes of Nor killed 18,000 to 24,000 Skaven over those 2 months. Considering that the Skaven likely weren't content to attack only once a day, their death toll is likely even higher than that. The Axes of Nor were finally relieved from holding the door of Bar Undak by a band of 20 slayers. Belegar was assembling his forces for an all-out battle that would hopefully end in the death of Queek Headtaker, and he needed as many warriors with him as possible. The slayers swept through the Thagaraki like a tide of orange-crested death, pushing through the Hall of Reckoning and into the tunnels beneath. This bought the Axes of Nor enough time to blow up the passageway into the citadel, sealing off the entryway they had spent 2 long months guarding. They then joined their king in the Hall of Clan Skalfton. This was where Belegar wished to kill Queek, and it was where the full might of the dwarfs of Vala Azrael Ungol would be matched against that of Clan Moors. The Axes of Nor were given the honor of guarding one of the dwarfen flanks, protecting the artillery pieces as they blasted the Skaven to bits. They held the line against a horde of chittering ratmen, but not without further losses, until the Skaven broke and fled like the cowards they are. Unfortunately, at this point the Night Goblin warlord Skarsnik broke through the ground at the head of a massive greenskin army and attacked both Skaven and Dwarf alike. He had bribed the Ogre mercenaries fighting alongside the Dwarfs, led by Golfag Maneater, to turn upon their Dawi employers at his signal. Now attacked by Groby, treacherous Ogres, and the newly rallied Skaven, what was once a Pyrrhic victory for the Dwarfs turned into a full-blown catastrophe. Belegar sounded the retreat, but the Axes of Nor and the artillery they had been guarding were charged by Golfag and his band of man-eaters. While the Ironbreakers and artillery pieces managed to sell their lives dearly, slaying several Ogres, they were swiftly overwhelmed and slaughtered. Only their Thane, Borek Norgrimson, survived the initial assault. Crippled by the Ogre's monstrous charge, Borek was left alive by the man-eaters amongst his fellow kin after Golfag tried to commiserate with him over how difficult dwarfs were to kill. The unfortunate Thane didn't survive much longer, however, as Belegar's last, desperate measure was to detonate several blasting charges in the hall and collapse the roof. While a number of Belegar's warriors managed to escape, Borek was not amongst them. So ended the Axes of Nor, the most renowned unit of Ironbreakers in the entirety of the Karazhan Corps. In Total War Warhammer, Norgrimlings Ironbreakers are the premier defensive unit in the game. They were introduced in the King and the Warlord DLC way back in Total War Warhammer 1, and they've been making a name for themselves ever since. Norgrimlings Ironbreakers weigh in at 1650 gold in multiplayer, making them the second most expensive melee infantry unit on the Dwarf roster. Their only competitor is the generic rank 9 counterpart, which costs 1687 gold in multiplayer. If you only wanted a rank 9 Ironbreaker unit, you may as well take Norgrimlings Ironbreakers instead for the savings, if nothing else. Hey everyone, small interlude here. I was slightly mistaken. Rank 9 Doomseekers are actually the most expensive infantry unit on the Dwarf roster. They weigh in at 1,814 gold. So it goes Rank 9 Doomseekers, Rank 9 Ironbreakers, then Norgrimlings Ironbreakers. Apologies for the confusion, I just didn't want to record the whole paragraph again for one ultimately pretty small correction. With high mass, silver shields, 35% spell resistance, an armor value of 125, and 79 melee defense, there's nothing that can cut through these things quickly. These stats aren't any higher than a generic rank 9 Ironbreaker unit, but they're still impressive nonetheless. Barring Lords and Heroes, the only thing in the entire game with more melee defense than them are rank 9 Chosen of Slaanesh with Hell Scourges, and they cost over 350 gold more than the Regiment of Renown. Additionally, Norgrimlings Ironbreakers have more models than their generic brethren. On large unit scales, normal Ironbreakers have 75 models, while the Norgrimlings have 90. That increases their hit point pool by sizable margins, making them even harder to chew through. This is the main selling point of Norgrimlings Ironbreakers over other Ironbreakers, as it makes them even better at what Ironbreakers are supposed to do, namely, hold the line. That being said, Norgrimlings Ironbreakers aren't a slouch offensively either. They have a melee attack of 43 and 32 weapon strength, though only 10 of that is armor piercing. The Ironbreakers also have a devastating blasting charge attack that disrupts oncoming enemies and does a lot of damage. If you get them early on in campaign, Norgrimlings Ironbreakers can absolutely crush low armor infantry with these things. The charges don't do too poorly against heavily armored infantry either, just don't waste them on monsters. You'll note that I didn't mention these blasting charges in the lore at all. That's because the Axes of Nor weren't throwing explosives left and right. Sure, they might use blasting charges to seal a tunnel or two, but they weren't acting as heavily armored grenadiers. On tabletop, only the champion in a unit of Ironbreakers could carry these bombs into combat, and the Axes of Nor were no exception. While Ironbreakers' implementation in Total War Warhammer's explosive infantry is a fun game change to differentiate them from Dwarf warriors and Longbeards, I just wanted to make it clear that it's not something you would have actually seen on the tabletop or in the lore. In addition to their defensive and offensive capabilities, Norgrimlings Ironbreakers come with a small smattering of special rules. They have immune to psychology, which is unlikely to see much use. If psychology is affecting an elite regiment of Dwarf infantry, they've probably already been damaged beyond functionality, but it's never bad to have. Norgrimlings Ironbreakers also have the Vanguard special rule. While this is unlikely to see much play in campaign or land battle, it's not bad to have in domination. You can call them in from one of your forward deployment spots and get them into the thick of things far faster than a normal Ironbreaker unit. You could even use them to stealthily take and hold a lightly guarded enemy objective. They aren't great at killing things quickly, but Norgrimlings Ironbreakers can hold these forward objectives single-handedly for quite some time. If an enemy wants to push them away, they'll have to spend considerable resources on doing so, which means you'll have an easier time fighting over the other objectives in the meantime. They are still slow, though, and saving up 1,650 points to deploy them can be quite prohibitive. I wouldn't base your entire strategy around it if any money is on the line, but it can be fun in a low-stakes game. With that, we've come to the end of our overview of Norgrimlings Ironbreakers. This one's been a long time coming, and I think I've been getting requests for it pretty much since I started the channel. There's good reason for the delay, though. I didn't have the 8th edition Dwarf Army book or either of the Dwarf End Times books when I began, and I only acquired these within the past several months. As you might have guessed from the lore section, all 3 were required components in making this video. Still, I'm happy to make it, even if there isn't really a unit in the lore known as Norgrimlings Ironbreakers. I love dwarfs, and if there wasn't already a guy operating under the name, I probably would have named this channel after the Great Book of Grudges. Ironbreakers are a particular favorite of mine, as I love their tankiness and ability to generally ignore low-tier units. As always, I'd like to once again thank my patrons, Emmy, Golden Gander, and Unknown. You're the Axes of Nor in the line ahead of me, propping me up in the midst of battle so I can take a short nap if needed. That's all for today, though. Until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.